Hey, Pivot. Wow. So the audience reaction after that last session was vigorous and furious. You guys were really engaged. That was awesome. All right, so here we are at the Pivot 2022 New Venture Competition. I just want to say a word about how this competition has changed over the past, well, since 2020. So at Pivot 2020, we didn't have enough startups to even have a competition. There was not a sufficient ecosystem to build anything yet. 2021, a totally different situation, and we had an awesome group of startups that did semifinals and finals. And in terms of Pivot 2022, the growth of the startup ecosystem and the innovation ecosystem around geothermal is really apparent just in the number of entries we had. So we had to do a huge cut even to get into semifinals this year, which were judged, and we have our 4 finalists that will be competing for you today. Now, remember, we have awesome guest judges for this competition, and I will introduce them in a moment. They are here to offer thoughts and inspiration and comments for the teams. But this competition is audience choice. So what we're looking for in these teams' audience is who's going to have the fastest impact in geothermal, and who's going to take geothermal exponential. So keep that in mind as you watch the pitches. So the judges this year, total badasses, and I want to introduce them by name and then by description, and kind of say a few words about why they're here. Jacqueline Novogratz, Chris Anderson, amazing. Jacqueline is CEO of Acumen, and Acumen is really unique in that it is searching for climate solutions that also address poverty. Jacqueline is a personal inspiration for me. She actually authored a book called Manifesto for a Moral Revolution, and that book has really guided my journey over the past couple of months in trying to wade through how to keep going and build momentum in geothermal. An incredible, brilliant business mind, and really excited to have Jacqueline on the stage. Chris, curator of TED, returning to Pivot 2022. He was one of our guests last year. Has begun investing in new climate concepts, so energy concepts that are underfunded and undervalued in their potential impact for the future. Incredible convener around geothermal, incredible ally for geothermal. Very, very lucky to have Chris on the side of geothermal. So welcome to both of you, Jacqueline and Chris, to the Pivot 2022 stage. Woohoo!
Woohoo! Great to be here, Jamie.
All right. So I'll give you an easy question to start, just to break the ice. Y'all ready? So why is geothermal cool? What do you like about geothermal? Like, why are you here?
Jacqueline, you go.
So, what isn't cool? I would say 3 things, really. One, geothermal is cool because it's anywhere on the planet, and therefore there's a real opportunity using what's already beneath the Earth's surface to electrify, light the world in ways that can make an enormous dent in the climate crisis. 2, I love this word pivot, because I'm a believer in transformation in almost everything that we do at Acumen. And so using the technologies that came from a dirty industry and transforming it into the green energy transition is super cool. And 3, super cool. Jamie Beard is a massive cheerleader and ambassador for the entire endeavor, and it's really a thrill to be here.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Yes.
Well, it really is, and I don't know if people watching know how much of an influence you've had, Jamie, on the outside world. Like a year ago, you came to TED and gave a talk making this argument that the oil and gas industry could pivot into geothermal, that the skills are there, the technologies are there, and that there was a chance to do something absolutely historic. You're an amazing speaker. Like that was possibly the best talk of that whole.
This is the most scared I've ever been in my life, please.
You're an amazing speaker, and you changed a lot of people's minds. This is an audience that doesn't normally want to think nice thoughts about the oil and gas industry, I would say. And you're a persuader, and certainly that persuasion has been impactful on me personally, and has got me personally really, really, really excited about this alluring possibility that there's this, near infinite amount of energy just there, just a few miles away, and at the feet of everyone on the planet. Wow. And so the work of these startups is like, it couldn't matter more.
Awesome. Well, let's launch, shall we? So what we're going to do now, we're going to watch the pitches of the finalists. We'll have a little bit of space in between audience to make some comments about the teams, but we'll save most of the discussion for the end. And then we'll remember, you're taking notes because this is audience choice. So take some notes on how you feel about these teams as you watch their pitches. All right, so then let's go ahead and cue the first startup team, Transitional Energy. We'll be back.
Hello, PIVOT2022 community. My name is Salina Derichsweiler, and I'm the CEO of Transitional Energy. I'm sure everyone's seen all the newest James Webb images. I'm so blown away by the change in technology and how we can really see into deep space. And really, honestly, 7,600 light years away sort of breaks my brain down. What I'm most amazed by, what I really think of when I see these images, I mean, Carina Nebula is probably my favorite. It's this wonderful story of a nursery for infant stars, a place of starting. And I really think of Carl Sagan's quote about being a dust mote in a sunbeam, that we really are just part of a larger system. It's, it's been pretty well documented that photos can really change our perspective. And when we saw the Earthrise from the moon landing in 1968, that really shifted our perspective and created shifts in awareness. And Carl Sagan's words, as we look at our universe and look at our Earth, that's here, that's home, that's us. On it is everything you love, everyone you know, the aggregate of our joy and our suffering, every mother and every father, every hopeful child, every inventor, and every explorer. This way of seeing the Earth is called the overview effect. That brilliant jewel in a black sky, as the astronaut Buzz Aldrin described it, that experience of seeing the reality of Earth from space. The idea that we're just a fragile ball, we're hanging in the void, we're shielded and nourished only by a paper-thin atmosphere. This is a unifying experience, one that is Earth is all one system, and we are all part of that system. And probably what keeps me most up at night is that we have 7 years on the climate clock, enough to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees C. This is absolutely true, truly all hands on deck moment. I can feel the sense of urgency in my bones. Step one of solving any problem, especially big existential problems like climate change, is don't panic. We know we can do this. In order to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees C, we need to reduce carbon emissions by 7.4% per year. So how are we doing? Data is my favorite part of being an engineer. The carbon cuts as a result of the lockdowns from COVID-19 show us that we are capable of a global effort for the good of all. Across the world, it was found that there was a 6.4% reduction in CO2 emissions, or 2.3 billion tons of CO2 was reduced. In the United States, it was an even larger drop of 12.9%. In India, it was right around that goal at 8%. So when we think about pictures and turning numbers into something that we can experience, man, I remember so vividly during the pandemic, we incorporated our company, and I remember living through this time, and I remember seeing all these photos of these blue skies. This is what 2.3 billion tons of carbon reduction looks like in our own communities. I lived in California for nearly a decade in the first half of my career, and I was absolutely astounded at the photos of clear blue skies and crisp views of Los Angeles. And New Delhi, same thing, clear air and the animals returning. So I think this is another example of that overview effect. We're all part of this one system. We're all part of Earth. And now we know we're capable of change on a global scale. At Transitional Energy, we're a US-based company. We were founded during the pandemic lockdowns, as I said, and we believe that energy transition is for communities and for workers. We believe we are the people we've been waiting for. We are a majority woman-owned company, and we're oil field veterans with over 100 years combined experience. This is our team picture at our first deployment, which is super exciting to talk about this year at Pivot. I'm standing all the way to the right. Next to me is Sarah Hartford, our CFO. Next to her is Ben Burke, our co-founder and CTO. Leah Cedillos is not only a master builder at Lego, but we call her our master builder as our SVP of operations at TE. Dr. Russell Roundtree is an engineering advisor and creative pioneer. And Joanna Ostrom, flanking the other side of our team, as our COO. We are system integrators, and we develop geothermal resources from oil fields utilizing existing infrastructure to generate clean baseload power for the grid. We provide an immediate solution to reduce those carbon emissions in the energy system. And this is our expertise, execution. This has been 2 years in the making and was incredibly exciting to go out to the field, get everything installed and see what we've built right in front of us. And really what we do is bring binary cycle technology out to the oil field. And this is where we integrate that technology with existing oil wells and existing tanks. You can see how our unit right there fits right next to those water tanks. This is our first deployment of a patent pending Sedna geothermal system. This converts the heat waste that comes off the produced fluids into clean power. This happens to be an active oil field in Nevada. We're go-to-market ready. The Sedna geothermal system is this mobile, modular, and ruggedized. It can plug and play directly into existing oil field infrastructure. And the biggest win is that it can be installed and operational within 2 weeks. This distributed geothermal system is integrated with all those existing oil field infrastructure. It provides that immediate carbon reduction because not only can we pull the oil and gas companies off the grid and generate power on site, but we can also replace any natural gas and diesel generation. And so this results in 320 tons of CO2 reduction per installation of each system. And at Transitional Energy, this came together because this was a community effort. We're very collaborative focused. We believe that it drives our greatest success. Grand Canyon Oil and Gas is a forward-looking oil and gas company. That's the site that we put the work out on Nevada. We're partnering with the federal government on a DOE grant to be able to move to 1 megawatt out there. We're also partnering with Electrotherm and with the National Renewable Energy Lab. On our other projects, we really look to pull in people who have expertise that we don't, since we're oil field veterans. RM Power Solutions does a lot of work on our electrical side. AWS helps us on our IT side. And then United Power is a wonderful partner here in Colorado that we're working with to replace 35% of their load goes to oil and gas. So if we can take that load off their grid and replace it with clean geothermal, we're going to be leading the way here in Colorado. We have a number of professional organizations who also support us: Clean Energy Business Network and Clean Tech Leaders Roundtable, Colorado Clean Tech Industries. And we're just so thankful for all of that investment and belief and development. We're going to be developing long-term relationships with additional renewable power providers to think about solar gardens and geothermal gardens and how those might lay together. With over 2.3 million wellbores in all the oil and gas basins that have the right temperature for geothermal development, we're just getting started. Over the next 12 months, we plan to deploy 15 new systems, and we're going to do that under 3 different projects. The first one will be with the DOE grant and Grand Canyon Oil and Gas in Nevada. We'll be scaling from our current 75 kilowatt deployment to a 1 megawatt deployment. This will really think about how we bring geothermal energy to rural communities, which is a big focus of ours as we think about bringing the oil and gas industry with us to the clean energy economy. The second project is really developing 500 kilowatts right in our own backyard in Colorado, in the state of Colorado. We'll be working with United Power in their territory to develop that, as well as several local operators, which I would love to discuss. So hopefully next year we'll be able to discuss some of those details with all of you. And then the last project is one that really touches my heart. I'm Native American, and I think really thinking about just energy transition is an important factor when we move to a clean energy. And so we'll be developing a 500 kilowatts with the MHA Nation on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in North Dakota. And we'll again be working with local E&P operators. Beyond that, we're just really scaling fast. We've had a lot of future commercial projects identified. All of those blue stars is where we've quantified geothermal resources for clients. And in those areas, we're now moving toward engineering design and execution for 2023. So it is just a super exciting time to go from one to so many and see so much quick adoption. And if we really tackle these 2 million wellbores, there is 250 gigawatts of power potential at a conservative number in these basins. And if we could just tackle that, if we were able to do all 2 million wellbores, that would be about 50% of what was achieved globally from the COVID-19 lockdowns. So this is one small shift in perspective, one small add in the energy system, and we suddenly have an abundance of resources. So let's use the heat beneath our feet to save our Earth, the only home we've ever known. And of course, like any startup company, to scale, we need some capital. If you want to help us bridge the energy gap, please contact us at our info account. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
All right, so we're back. Okay, so I want to give some perspective on what we just saw. A lot of what the innovation ecosystem that's coming out of oil and gas and jumping into geothermal is doing is very different than you might see in traditional climate funding or impact funding circles. And they, you tend to see you tend to see concepts that are very moonshotty in climate circles and in VCs, where these big fusion concepts, but they can't be done now. They're not at all incremental. They're big, but they're in 10 years kind of concepts. And a lot of what you see in startups like Transitional and the rest of the group today is that they're making strides forward, but they're doing what they know they can do now, right? So in Transitional's case, they're going to oil fields and making electricity from hot fluids, right? Because we know we can do that now. And let's make as much as we can, and let's cut what we can and then learn as we go. What's your thought about that? What do you guys think after you've seen Transitional?
I'll jump in first, I guess. Look, the idea of leveraging existing wells seems great. Already the work has been done to get down there close to the heat. If you can tap into that, that's great. The presentation was beautiful. It was inspiring. If you wanted to critique it as a potential investor, I would say it's almost like long on inspiration, a little short on details. Because the key issue with geothermal is cost, right? Like can electricity be delivered for an amount that is competitive with other options out there? Traditionally, people have struggled to get geothermal in many locations below, 15, 16 cents a kilowatt hour. And it kind of needs to be below 10, probably, like in most circumstances. And so to me, what I'm looking for is some insight. What have you discovered? What are you doing that is a unique solution to the economic problem? What piece of ingenuity have you come up with that says this is how we will make this cost effective? And definitely starting with existing oil wells might be the key, but I kind of want to know more. I want to know what actually happens to make this cost effective, because we all are inspired by the need for a cleaner planet. We all love Carl Sagan, but the unique thing that you're doing, that's what I want to know just a little bit more about.
Thanks for that, Chris. Jacqueline?
And I would just add, I love what Chris said. I love that this is a woman-driven team. the focus on justice and including in partnership partners like Native American communities, and that you're already tapping into government subsidy as a way of proving the model. My questions are connected to where Chris went, except I was thinking about it more in terms of proving out unit profitability and then scale. To go from, what does it actually take to go from 75 kilowatts to 1 megawatt? And then in terms of the moonshot, could you give us a sense of that 1 megawatt system impacting how many rural households, and what will that actually, how do you scale that in a way that makes sense for growth?
Thanks for that, Jacqueline. And that is your comment about female entrepreneurs. That's a trend that we saw this year as opposed to last year, where there are a lot of women-led geothermal startups now, and it's pretty cool and been fun to watch. So it's good stuff. Okay, so we have to segue into our next pitch. So let's cue Criterion Energy Partners.
Did you know there's a renewable energy source with terawatts of potential that does not rely on the wind or the sun? There's also an industry with billions of dollars in technology and talent ready to be deployed, perfectly positioned to unlock this resource. My name is Sean Marshall, the CFO of Criterion Energy Partners, and I'm here to tell you how we plan to deploy next generation geothermal energy. The domestic energy market is absolutely massive. This is over $1 trillion in market potential, but it's largely dominated by fossil fuels. The renewable energy market makes up just a small slice of this entire supply stack and has drastic room for improvement. Geothermal energy is the only scalable baseload renewable resource available to us in the different opportunities that we have from supply sources. We believe this is why it is a great complement to leverage geothermal with other energy sources, including wind and solar. Historically, geothermal is a very mature industry, and it's been around for over 100 years. However, it's been tended to be regionally constrained into certain areas where you have specific geological anomalies or areas with tectonic activity. We believe that with proven technologies, we can begin to deploy geothermal energy into new markets in new regions. Our main thesis is combining what we've seen and done in kind of the unconventional space in oil and gas, horizontal wells and directional drilling technologies, combining those with multi-stage completions and reservoir simulation techniques, and combining that with binary organic Rankine cycle turbines. We believe we can combine these proven technologies today to start deploying geothermal energy into new markets in new regions. In addition to these proven technologies, Criterion Energy Partners is also developing some proprietary technologies that help us de-risk the subsurface and enhance the productivity of our projects. One of those areas is fluid systems, which are really looking at controlling the performance of the reservoir and the life of the reservoir. We're also developing a screening tool, which we've used to identify dozens of different targets and potential opportunities for project sites. And then we believe in building well and completion designs that are really driven for different geologies and different resource types and can be deployed all together in a combined system. The Criterion geothermal system is designed to be co-located with large consumers of both power and direct heat. The value propositions that this system provides are the ability for our customers to address their Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, to provide a level of increased reliability and resiliency for their energy supply, also protect long-term price uncertainty, and we can also provide renewable energy credits and carbon offset credits, and also some investment credits. We envision building these systems in sort of a phased development approach of about 20 megawatts each, and believe that we can get upwards of individual site having, say, 100 megawatts per project. But again, being done in sort of that phased development approach. We've identified a material beachhead market, which is along the Texas Gulf Coast. There's a geopressured system that runs from Corpus Christi all the way up to Port Arthur. And so we've kind of taken this approach or identified this area based on a number of things. The first one is the resource type. The geopressured system really lends itself, and the temperature profile lend themselves to what existing technologies can start to be deployed in today. There's also a huge market opportunity from a industrial presence along the Gulf Coast with chemical and petrochemical refiners who use a lot of power and direct heat in their processes. And then also, and maybe more importantly, there's an immense emissions impact that we can have here by helping address these Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions using renewable thermal energy for both power and heat. We can help these facilities really start to address their emissions profile, which is greatly needed not only in the region, but more broadly for the world and the challenges that we're facing with climate change and the like. Our go-to-market strategy is really designed to take, another sort of phased approach to developing resources. So we're looking to really build a foundational business along the Texas Gulf Coast, this geopressured system, then step out to what we describe as sort of hot, wet rock areas where you don't have as much permeability and porosity and fluid in place, but you still have really nice temperature gradients and addressable resources. And then ultimately stepping out to hot, dry rock, where we see playing a material role in being able to take geothermal everywhere. But doing this phased approach, we really believe that'll allow us to start thinking about how we can unlock places like New York and Florida for, combined heat and power projects or utility scale power projects by taking that really phased approach. We're looking to do a pilot or a demonstration project over the next, through the rest of the year. And we're really excited to have some announcements that'll be coming out over the coming weeks and months around that project and the opportunity there. We've laid out a nice roadmap here and really thinking back in terms of where we've been and where we're going and the like. My business partner, Danny, and I met when we were in business school at Rice. I was spending a lot of time in corporate development and actually investment banking, and he was working on developing and operating assets around the world. We really started talking about what a renewable energy company or an energy company might look one day. And in 2020, we found ourselves with the opportunity to focus on that full time. So one of the first things we did was we acquired a small lease near the Utah Forge project. We then spent some time in a few different kind of incubators and accelerator programs, and also did some kind of non-operated work with some partners. Recently this year, we were very excited to announce a safe round investment and strategic partnership with a public company called Patterson-UTI. They're one of the leading drilling rig contractors and energy service providers in the industry, and we're very excited to build on top of that relationship and really appreciate them believing in our vision for geothermal energy and the way that we look to deploy it. Over the next year or so, we have been doing feasibility studies and identifying sites and opportunities. We're looking to do this demonstration project. And recently we were awarded an SBIR grant to accelerate the development of our industrial direct connect technology. We'll look to raise some additional capital through the balance of the year and are looking to launch a Series A round early in 2023. Our vision sort of for the next 5 to 7 years is to really identify 10 project opportunities throughout sort of our go-to-market strategy regions and bring about 3 of those online and have 10 of them reach final investment decision. We'd like to be the operators of these assets for longer term and look to play a meaningful role in developing and maintaining these assets for decades. This is a little bit about the grant award that I mentioned that we recently received. Again, that's to expand the development or accelerate the development of our industrial direct connect technology with a partnership with the city of Baytown and the US DOE and the Advanced Manufacturing Office. We're very excited to announce that and look forward to keeping you all updated as we make progress on the development there. We've been extremely fortunate to build an amazing leadership team, very complementary skills and a lot of diverse expertise with years of industry experience in both energy and operations, finance, and also technology. We've got in addition to our leadership team, we've got a great group of advisors and also supporting staff that continues to grow, that we're very thankful to be working with these folks and having such a great resource to build on and really take geothermal into new markets and new regions. With that, I want to thank you very much for your time today, also your participation in Pivot, and for your interest in geothermal. We're looking to connect with like-minded individuals and stakeholders who share our vision to make geothermal energy commercially viable everywhere. If you're a prospective customer, partner, or investor, or just want to learn more about geothermal, please connect with myself or someone from the team. Thanks again, and please enjoy the conference.
All right, so we're back. So that's Criterion Energy Partners, and just some perspective, an overall perspective on them. Really, that team has, it's an oil and gas team, emerged, all Texas. They really have pulled critical mass in terms of momentum in Texas, right? So they're focused on Texas development first, Texas demonstrations, Texas Gulf Coast, particularly decarbonizing the industrial sector of Texas. And they've built a lot of Texas relationships, including now a corporate partnership with Patterson UTI. So they have kind of followed, Chris, the Sage model that Sage was experiencing a couple of years ago. What are your perspectives? What are your thoughts on Criterion?
Yeah, so I'm intrigued at like the slide there that got my attention most vividly was the one showing how the intention was to partner with sites or companies that can offer, I think I heard, an existing connection to the grid and an existing heat source. I don't know whether that sounds like maybe an existing coal power station or an oil operation. That part I wasn't quite clear on, but that, to me, the potential for transformative economics, at least in the early years, may well rest in that type of partnership. Because on the one hand, those existing plants are under pressure to offset their emissions. And on the other hand, the cost of connecting to the grid, which is big, that can be a big part and a big hassle for someone, trying to build a startup. That is already taken care of. So to have some of those core costs managed and potentially to get some of the revenue from some form of recognition of the carbon offsetting or whatever that's going on, that feels like that could be good. But I have to say, I didn't fully understand exactly. Like I didn't quite have an aha moment. That is how they are doing it. But I mean, the level of connections, the quality of the team, there's a lot to be excited about there. And I would just like to understand better. It's what Jacqueline said in the earlier case. What are the unit economics? Like what does it look like if you were going to partner with, I don't know, a coal power station or whatever, and transform their economics and give them a transition away? What does that actually look like economically? And then you can imagine scaling that up.
Thanks for that, Chris. Jacqueline?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Chris. That was where my confusion was too. I was very excited by the team and having known a number of entrepreneurs from Rice, excited to see that kind of continuity, the experience brought in, and you could feel a sense of trust just listening to the entrepreneur speaking. I had the same questions as Chris, but I would also say, and it's partially my own ignorance, but in terms of the pilot, why only through a connection to the grid? not only in terms of cost, but speed. And if you are at the pilot stage, how does that compare with an off-grid solution? Is that not even part of it? So there was just so much information I wanted to dig into in this moment in a state like Texas, where fragility to our climate solutions is also a part of the puzzle.
Yeah. My fault because I time constrained them so badly they had to choose their slides carefully, but yeah, so awesome. Thank you for those comments all. Let's go ahead and segue into our next pitch. This is Bedrock Energy, so let's cue that. We'll be back.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joselyn Lai, and I'm a co-founder and the CEO of Bedrock Energy. At Bedrock, our mission is to transform the heating and cooling of buildings using geothermal energy to radically reduce costs for people and the environment. Building operations represent over 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The lion's share of that is actually heating and cooling of those buildings. It accounts for 4 gigatons of carbon dioxide every single year. This amount is actually well exceeding the 3 gigatons emitted by cars globally. And heating and cooling of buildings is actually growing every year as weather becomes more and more extreme around the world. We all know that decarbonizing heat is of critical importance, especially in Europe right now, quite urgently, as geopolitics are wreaking havoc on the global supply chain of natural gas. On the other side, on the cooling side, air conditioning efficiency is also an urgent need as dangerously hot temperatures become more and more frequent and unfortunately fatal, as we've seen throughout the world in recent summers, and most recently this very month in Western Europe, Northern Africa, and the Southwest United States. Rising demand for life-saving air conditioning actually puts enormous strain on the grid as well. But the good news is that society has a secret weapon for decarbonizing heat and stabilizing power demand at the same time. This is an ace in the hole that has been overlooked for far too long. What that is low temperature, shallow geothermal. This type of geothermal has been well established for many decades as the single most efficient way to heat and cool buildings. It is the only way to electrify buildings, which means cutting them off from fossil fuels while also reducing electricity usage simultaneously. Geothermal boreholes do this by moving heat in and out of the ground hyper-efficiently. This enables HVAC performance that is 5 or 6 times more efficient than traditional gas heaters. And this capability is of particular value for large buildings. Large commercial, industrial, and multi-residential buildings often have no viable net zero solution today. Most electrification options either significantly increase your power demand or they require impossible amounts of rooftop or window space, and it just doesn't fit. Geothermal, on the other hand, puts the HVAC system underground, and so it overcomes both issues, while also being safer, healthier, and quieter than any other HVAC system out there. Yet, while geothermal heating and cooling is incredible, for most large buildings today, it is currently impossible. And there are 4 reasons for this. First, intensive manual system designs can take months to complete, sometimes even years for the whole project. And the manual system designs lack meaningful surface engineering expertise. They assume hundreds of fairly shallow boreholes, which then require massive surface area in order to generate the required heating and cooling load for a large building. And then the drilling and constructions of so many boreholes can take those months and sometimes even years to drill. Altogether, the upfront costs are often in the millions for large buildings. Bedrock is here to remove those barriers to adoption. We're doing this by leveraging cutting-edge technology and expertise from the oil and gas industry. With Bedrock's autonomous drilling technology and our machine learning algorithms, we will completely transform the real estate industry's ability to utilize geothermal heating and cooling in large urban buildings. And we will do this faster, cheaper, and with much smaller surface footprint, thus providing a payback period that is well within reason for a commercial real estate customer. And at the same time, we will be providing much higher energy performance long-term, given the intelligence and the data that our systems are designed upon. As a result, Bedrock's breakthrough technology means that urban buildings everywhere in the world can benefit from safe, clean geothermal heating and cooling. Suddenly, a massive segment of existing commercial, multi-residential, and industrial real estate is a newly serviceable, addressable market for geothermal. Not only new construction, but also retrofits of existing building stock. And by shrinking that first surface footprint, as mentioned, driving down those installation costs and timelines, and then driving up geothermal heat pump performance, we shrink those payback periods for the geothermal heating and cooling system install down to only 3 to 5 years, instead of 1 or 2 decades, or sometimes even more than that. In addition to those short payback periods, our predictive geothermal optimization algorithms make geothermal heating and cooling a predictable, data-driven, high-performance energy asset. What that means is that geothermal heat pumps, after so many decades of usage, will finally become a reliable, financeable asset class for hundreds of billions of dollars in clean energy deployment capital that has historically focused on solar and wind, but is currently hungry for more projects and more asset classes to invest in. Previously, the primary market for geothermal heat pumps has been single-family homes with plenty of space in the suburbs and patience for long payback periods, similar to a 30-year mortgage. Alternatively, we'll see geothermal heating and cooling in universities, military bases, really forward-looking municipalities, and high-end greenfield development projects. And historically, those kinds of customers have installed geothermal district heating, but have paid top dollar for a very luxurious HVAC solution. We think at Bedrock that geothermal heating and cooling should be scaling well beyond those niche segments. By enabling large commercial and multi-residential real estate in urban locations to also access geothermal affordably, Bedrock then opens up over 150 billion more square feet of existing real estate in the US alone, and hundreds more billions of square feet globally. This segment is now possible to decarbonize with ultra-efficient geothermal heating and cooling at scale and with immediate positive impact to grid stability and to building owners' pocketbooks. And geothermal heat pumps are a technology that can do so today and can commercialize this very year. We'll serve those large urban buildings well because Bedrock's technology enables true productization and standardization of large geothermal heating and cooling systems. What you see here is the intensely bespoke, very impressive, but highly complex geothermal installation that St. Patrick's Cathedral paid double-digit millions of dollars to install in the heart of Manhattan. And they did so using conventional drilling technology and minimal software and robotics enablement. However, Bedrock is making this kind of project scalable for any building owner anywhere. The time is ripe for us to unlock geothermal for widespread use among customer segments like that. Billions of square feet of real estate in just the US alone are under corporate commitments to decarbonize. And on top of that, cities, states, and the federal government are urgently incentivizing building decarbonization and actually phasing out natural gas hookups for new construction in an increasing number of cities. Only geothermal can meet this challenge without straining the power grid, blowing owners' budgets, or creating dependence on foreign supply chains. Imagine a world where, in the very city that you hail from, net zero buildings are the standard. not just for fancy LEED Platinum Class A properties, but for every building that you and your loved ones work, live, and play in. With buildings that are free of bulky cooling towers and condensers on the rooftops, we'll free ourselves from the urban heat island effect that are plaguing our southern cities. We'll be free to install more clean rooftop solar everywhere and free to socialize on sunny roof decks with our neighbors and colleagues. Our children will breathe cleaner air and sleep in quieter buildings. And this future, this green urban future, is the future that Bedrock enables. And Bedrock is very ready to meet this challenge. In only 3 months since incorporation, we raised $6 million in venture funding from top climate tech firms in an oversubscribed round that we closed just this month. We also closed 2 prominent companies as pilot customers for paid demonstration projects in early fall of this year, where we'll be installing geothermal heating and cooling systems and decarbonizing their buildings. We also have our first of many patents submitted for a proprietary technology stack related to this autonomous drilling platform. We're moving exceptionally fast, and we expect to unlock a truly scalable, financeable, distributed shallow geothermal industry within the next few years. We are moving so quickly because we are a multidisciplinary team with the critical skill sets combined for innovating in both technology and business model. We combine extensive oil and gas technology experience with a Silicon Valley venture building model. We're excited to scale geothermal heating and cooling to large buildings everywhere in the world. We would love to meet you and chat about partnerships and future investment. You can find us at bedrockenergy.com, or you can reach out to me at joselyn@bedrockenergy.com. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for your interest in geothermal, and thank you to the other finalists in this venture competition.
All right, so we're back. So I'll give you a little lead in on this one. This team, I've talked with both of you in the past about how this innovation ecosystem is holding tension, in that there are cultural difficulties with all these all oil and gas teams going to try to raise money from largely Silicon Valley based venture capital firms, and this is not entirely working well. And Bedrock's a really interesting example of a team that is comprised of both tech entrepreneurs and a former chief scientist of an oil and gas company. So they figured out how to manage that tension within their team, and I think that's pretty cool. So this concept's a new one in the competition. So far, we've been talking about electricity, but this team is really getting at the idea that we can reduce consumption of electricity and fossil fuel use by actually being more efficient with how we heat and cool buildings, right? So it's a direct use type of concept for geothermal. What's your impression?
Thanks, Jamie. I remember seeing a TED talk by Bill Gross where he talked about the most important, thinking about what are the most important factors to successful companies. And it's clearly the team, the idea, but it's also the timing of the idea. And Joselyn did just a spectacular presentation in this moment of such extreme heat and need for air conditioning. How we address that problem becomes really critical. I thought the overall presentation was extremely smart and aspirational, and it combined that aspiration with not only some clear and concrete understanding of the business model, but also progress, to your point, Jamie, about venture capital already being raised and projects already underway. With all of these, the poor entrepreneurs are so stuck with having to speak in generalities. I wanted to understand a little bit more about where their partnerships, subsidies. I know that in New York City, for instance, this is a major issue that government is thinking about, to once again understand what are those upfront economics, how long does it take a company to make a decision to transition in terms of the costs that they will have to invest now versus longer term for it. But very exciting.
Thanks for that, Jacqueline.
Mm.
Yeah, and there actually have been developments in New York recently on this.
I've
this
been
very
part of
topic.
some of those conversations, and
Yeah.
it's really exciting.
Yeah,
to
it's
see
moving.
what's happening at the city level.
Yeah.
What do you think, Chris?
I mean, I agree that was a wow presentation. Joselyn took us on a journey there of one step at a time, of sort of building excitement and it's powerful. What's interesting about this compared with other geothermal startups is that normally we think of geothermal like you're drilling for heat, but here a lot of the economics is actually, especially in the summer, is you're drilling for cool, and for cool you don't have to drill far at all. There's cool water right there that can cool a building, which is why the economics are really, really interesting. The one thing I didn't understand is there's a lot of exciting promise there around machine learning and new technologies and so forth. I didn't understand what it is that has allowed such a radical reduction of the scale to make this work, and I'm sure there's a compelling story there. But if you can really pull off a 3 to 5 year payback period for an addition of this to an existing building, I mean that is huge. That can make an absolutely massive difference. So yeah. I'm definitely excited by this.
Cool. Thank you both. All right, last but not least, let's cue Icarus Energy. We'll be back.
All right. So the story Icarus, it's almost 2,000 years old at this point. And, often in today's world, we view it as a story of hubris and a tale of making incorrect decisions, right? But today I'm here to talk to you about the second part of the story that we don't often give enough credit to. And it's the story of an amazing technology. And in the case of this fable, the story of flight that falls by the wayside because of some misguided application. So my name is Spencer Bohlander, and my colleagues and myself at Icarus, we truly believe that if we don't do something today and right now for the geothermal industry, it's going to be the next amazing potential technology that falls by the wayside for a long, long time. We're almost over 60 years of drilling these geothermal wells, and we still have not really come up with a solution that's totally scalable, can be put anywhere, as well as anything that really isn't super heavily dependent on the natural resources of an area. So again, I'm Spencer Bohlander. I'm the CEO of Icarus, and I hope you enjoy the journey we're about ready to take together. So what is Icarus, right? So back in 2015, I'm sitting on a drilling rig in North America, and I'm standing on the shale shakers. This is the picture you see in front of you. And I hope you look this up because it's arguably one of the most important pieces of technology in the drilling world that gives us the things we have today. But I'm standing on the shale shaker and we're drilling a modestly hot well. This well is about 225 degrees bottom hole circulating temperature. And as I'm standing here and I'm watching the shakers, because this is the key to what's happening on a well, it's the lifeline. It's telling you what the well's doing. It's talking to you. And as my hands are in the shaker and I'm catching rocks that are coming back, I'm being burned because we're seeing temperatures come back to surface about 150 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And it hits me here because I'm a young drilling supervisor at the time, and it hits me, what are we doing, right? And the obvious answer to the question of what we were doing was we were getting hydrocarbons, right? There's a lot of BTUs packed into these little bad boys. But nonetheless, though, it struck me because we're drilling in a non-traditional geothermal basin. It's not even a geothermal basin, so to speak. We're chasing hydrocarbons, and here we are. We're throwing away all this extra heat. And again, it's low heat, but it was a very shallow well, only about 6,000 foot. So it hit me. Why are we not looking more into geothermal, specifically closed loop geothermal? So what do? I do what all good engineers do, and I put pen to paper. And by that, I mean, I open up a software that someone much more intelligent than me has designed so I can run models. And then I start recruiting people and my fellow colleagues at Icarus, and we run years and years of models to try to understand if we can create this closed loop single wellbore that we can put in a hot area to create some meaningful power generation, and specifically geothermal energy. And what we learned over years of modeling and modeling and modeling is that, in fact, there really wasn't a good solution for a single wellbore design. And what I have up in front of you, we don't need to get into it, but what we learned was that we found really there's three big buckets of challenges that we have to overcome when creating the geothermal system of the future. And the first bucket was no matter what we did to begin with here, we learned that the insulation of the wellbore, specifically a vertical wellbore, is not enough to keep a good amount of heat in at some of the lower flow rates. So we found out that we had to pump a well extremely fast. And if you're looking at the plot here and trying to interpret it quickly on the fly, a lot of the flow rates that you see at the very top are these slower flow rates. And you can see as you travel down the wellbore, you lose temperature very, very quickly to the cooler formations around. So that was bucket one, right? Bucket two that we learned very quickly is that we decided that a lateral wellbore was the way to go to solve the needs that we had, because we can increase our exposure time in a hot rock. And in the lateral wellbore, we quickly also learned that we have a thermal bottleneck. A lot of the things that we have to do for a wellbore, like pumping cement and specific types of casing, they create a thermal bottleneck that doesn't allow a lot of temperature to come into the wellbore. So whereas we decided that in our model we needed to pump a wellbore faster, we also learned that the faster we pump the wellbore, the fluid that we sent down to collect all this good heat in the hot rock didn't have enough exposure time to adequately suck enthalpy out of the formation. So we found a rock in a hard place, specifically in flow rates. And then finally, the third bucket that we really ran into full bore here was we learned that as we did our analysis and looking at all these different formations in the world, and we at Icarus, we're drillers. It's what we do. We're engineers, we're scientists, and we're operations folk. And we've put our hands in a lot of different ancient rock all around the world. And as we traveled, we learned that there's not a lot of rock that's really conducive to allowing heat to transmit through it efficiently enough to put a wellbore in and turn it on full time, right? So what we end up with these three buckets, and we decide, we have to figure out how to make a system that works with them. So we designed our system, the thermal soak method. And like I said, our thermal soak method specifically tackles these three buckets. We use some very advanced drilling practices to create a more insulated vertical section of the wellbore. We've worked with multiple service cement companies to come up with some cement blends and some proprietary techniques to increase the amount of heat that we can bring into our lateral faster. And last but not least, we developed a system that can account for these poor heat transfer rates that we see throughout rock almost everywhere in the world. And by doing these three buckets and fixing them, so to speak, and coming up with a solution, we have developed a system that's absolutely scalable. And we call it the thermal soak method. So what is our system specifically, right? This picture only shows three wellbores, but specifically, our design is multiple wellbores placed in the subsurface environment, typically 6 to 12 wells depending. And we run a coaxial setup. So we drill one well, we case it off with casing, and then we run a stinger pipe inside of it so we can circulate fluid across that wellbore up and down. And from our years and years of modeling and research, we learned that we can't just turn a well on and bring heat from the subsurface environment back up to the surface, because we'll deplete the reservoir, right? And ultimately, the most important thing that we do here at Icarus is we consider what the reservoir and the rock is telling us, because we have to protect it. Just like the hydrocarbon industry, just like the conventional geothermal industry, you can only make money and have production if you're protecting your reservoir. And this is exactly what our system does. We place a wellbore and we design it specifically so we can cycle it on and off and never totally zap the formation of all of its enthalpy around the wellbore and allow it to recoup itself. So very, very specifically, we put multiple wellbores in. If we do our numbers right, the lateral length is just perfect. And we turn our first wellbore on to bring fluid back to surface, while our other bores sit static and wait. And once we received a good amount of heated fluid from our first wellbore, we then shut it off, let it return to the static state, and we cycle on through our well bores. And by the time we come back to our very first one, the temperature has recouped itself. And we've been able to model out well past 30 to 35 years to show that this system is adequate in power production rates and protecting the wellbore. That being said, it's totally closed loop. We use water as our working fluid below the surface, and the heat flow that comes out to the surface goes into a binary organic ORC plant. And then our heated water gets turned around, gets used for direct heating purposes around 120, 150 degrees Fahrenheit, and goes right back down hole. So wonderful. So we're a little short on time, so we're going to go ahead and jump ahead to the business case here. So here at the very beginning stages of Icarus, we're currently bootstrapping. We found a niche in the conventional geothermal industry for drilling, and we're helping conventional players right now drill their wells faster, as well as learning information from ours. So right now we're bootstrapping. We're a service provider. And as we've been doing this, we've learned that there's multiple companies out there who would like to trial this technology. So we have 2 plants that we're negotiating right now through licensing agreement. And that's going to be our very, very initial proof of concept here. Is we have 2 plants going in, and we're very excited about the 2023 prospects here. The full scale, the business plan is we eventually want to own and totally operate these facilities. So plants 3 and plants 4, we plan to totally fundraise. Fund in-house with a debt equity ratio and put them out there. Right now, projections as far as development, we're seeing it takes about 6 months for plant installation. And yeah, we're excited. As you can see, we have our 2027 projections here from the government. And you can see our levelized cost to energy, and we've painstakingly modeled hundreds of different facilities across the United States here. And we come in very, very close to, like renewable energy sources. So right now, we have a domestic project we're working on. We have an international project as well. We're working with 2 different companies to build the state-of-the-art modeling software as a service system, as well as working with remote directional operations in conventional geothermal basins. So it looks like I'm over time here. I want to congratulate the rest of my finalists here for the New Ventures competition. And yeah, reach out to us. We're always looking to make more contacts, and this is exciting time. Let's make something happen in the geothermal world. Thanks, y'all.
All right, so we're back. One thing that strikes me about Icarus and Spencer is this team, enormous amount of oil and gas experience, obviously very knowledgeable, but extraordinarily modest, right? And he always comes across as honest and modest. Hey, we don't know everything, but we think we can figure it out kind of approach, right? And that's always kind of attracted me about the team. But what do you think about the concept itself? What do you think, Chris?
I mean, first of all, that graph at the end there, claiming that this can be done for $30 to $70 per megawatt hour. I mean, I think that's what 3 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. If that is real, that is the kind of breakthrough type pricing level that can allow something to absolutely take off. So that's exciting, and it's so interesting hearing how they've addressed, the fundamental problems of geothermal, which is how do you get the conductivity? Dry hot rock is not very conductive, and so how do you do it? And by laying these multiple coaxial wells or bores, that's an efficient way. That is an efficient way of doing it. And you leave them, and then when one is pumped out, you do the next, whatever. That sort of cyclic approach, it seems powerful potentially. I'm kind of super impressed that the economics are as strong as he claims that they are. And but it's so if that can be delivered, it seems very exciting. And I guess my remaining question is how many types of geology can you really do that at that kind of cost level? Because if that is achievable in many different types of rock, that's potentially huge.
Jacqueline, what do you think?
I don't have all that much to add. I do think that Spencer is very trustable, believable, and what I was thinking, and I leave it in part, it might be due to my own lack of experience in this particular area, is that he spent a lot of time on the technology, the engineering, the product, and I didn't fully understand the business plan and the real business model in a way that gave me real understanding of how this would play itself out. But to Chris's point, the technology combined with the promised cost structure was very, very exciting.
Well, this is a good segue to kind of some closing remarks I might ask of you two. I want to be cognizant of your time because we've been bantering on and we've gone over time. So but one thing I would say is there's been some struggles in terms of startup teams that are emerging from oil and gas entities and the oil and gas ecosystem pitching to impact investors. They don't quite know, or it's not super clear what terminology they should use and what is it that gets you really excited about a concept. And so, what would you say, just kind of in closing, what advice would you give these entrepreneurs when they go and they talk to impact investors? It's not necessarily IP. Maybe we leave the IP slide out, but what slide do we put in? What would get you really excited that folks would, that they could take away here today?
There's a long history of failed geothermal investments from Silicon Valley in the mid 2005, 2006, 2010, that kind of time period. A lot of things were tried and none of them worked. And so, I think the number one thing, honestly, is real conviction of how the economics have been achieved. Ultimately, it's quite simple. This has to be cost competitive. There has to be a way of delivering energy at massive scale that is more affordable than other choices. If there is, I think people will get very, very excited. I think the only other thing that there may be some, mistrust is this just a kind of Trojan horse, and actually this technology is going to be used somehow to, sustain an oil and gas industry initiative or whatever. But I mean, I think that's pretty easily achievable with make the economic case. But ultimately, Silicon Valley investors want to understand that there is a giant business here to be built.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I do think that we're in such a politically fraught time that there is ideology too. And one of the things I loved about Spencer, there's the honesty of owning experience, as well as talking about failures in the past and the why you as an entrepreneur are in this, what you've seen, why you've changed, what you're taking forward, so that this can be a massive play in a green transition. Starts to move people in ways that speak to where they may be holding their own biases, and yet, to Chris's point, can see both the environmental impact and the returns opportunity. And the second thing I would say is Silicon Valley is not the only rodeo, that there is a growing number of investors all around the world, both individual and institutional, that particularly after this summer, are really looking for innovation. And they want to bet at this stage of the companies, they want to bet on the idea and they want to bet on the people. And so to be open to other kinds of investors who are out there.
Amen. Well, thank you all. I just love you to death. Thank you so much for coming to Pivot 2022. That was amazing. So we will say adieu to Jacqueline and Chris. Thank you both for your awesome comments. So now, audience, what we will do is we will cue the audience choice poll. So here we go. After you've heard the judges' comments and after you've heard the pitches, let's pick the team that is going to have the biggest, fastest impact in geothermal. So let's cue the poll. All right, we're back. So that was a close one. This looks a lot like disruptive R&D. It's very, very close. All right, y'all. So the Audience Choice Award for the Pivot 2022 New Venture Competition goes to, at 37.07% of the vote, Bedrock Energy. Congratulations, y'all. Awesome job. Very much for tuning into this one. We're a little bit over, so stay tuned and we'll be right back.